Let this be a house of peace, of nature and humanity. Let this be a house, a haven for the healing, an open room for questions and our inspiration. Let this be a house, let this be a house of, let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of freedom, guardian of dignity, worth and deep beside us. Let this be a house, a platform for the free voice, where all our sacred differences here shall not divide us. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house, seek truth, where scientists and mystics bide in reverence here. Let this be a house of our creation, where words of art and melodies consecrate the atmosphere. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of peace. Let this be a house of prophecy. May visions for our children be a common theme. Let this be a house of myth and lore and legend, our trove of ancient story, cradle of a tender dreams. Let this be a house, let this be a house of peace. 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 Please be seated.
This is such an exciting time of year for me, at least, where all of you who have scattered to the four winds are returning back, and I get to see your faces on Sunday morning. What a blessing it is to be in worship with you. Do you know that song, Come, Come, Whoever You Are? It's in the Unitarian Universalist hymnal. Those are words from the poet Rumi, who said, Come, come, whoever you are, wanderer, worshiper, lover of leaving, ours is no caravan of despair. Come, yet again come. My colleague Ian Riddell wrote this in response to Rumi's poetry. Do you hear that voice calling us? That voice which calls us together here today in this room made holy by our presence and by the sacred breath we share in our singing and speaking and silence. That voice which calls us to remember that we're not alone and that we're inextricably linked to all other life, woven into a vast tapestry of existence of which we are a powerful, integral, and holy part. And just as we've been called together here today, we act as the voice, the heart, and the hands of another call. The call to walk with the wanderers, sing and dance with the worshipers, proclaim the memory of those who have taken their leave, wrap the despairing and the broken in arms of love and community, and hold the hands of all of us who have broken our vows and call us back again and again to the covenant and work of justice and humility and steadfast faithfulness. For this, we're here together today. So friends, come yet again. Let us worship together. Please join me in reading in unison as Roz lights our chalice. We kindle this flame.
Good morning. I'm Roz Hawkins and your worship associate today. What an honor it is always to be here. This month's theme is covenant, and while each promise we make to each other is important, none can be more important than opening our doors to all who seek to ask questions, to those who may be deemed different, to those looking for acceptance, for believers and non-believers alike. We welcome your curiosity, embrace your diversity, and open our hearts to you as individuals as a part of a human collective celebrating our commonalities. To members and returning friends, I extend a virtual hug. And to our visitors, please stand so that we may give you a warm UU welcome. Thank you for coming. You also get a virtual hug. And we really do appreciate you being here. At the end of service, we ask you to pick up a drink and a snack and then join us in the welcome circle right in the back of the sanctuary. And you can ask any questions about UUism or any questions about the service. And just a few housekeeping items. We do have a baby comfort room, and it's for those who are little and squiggly or larger and squiggly. And you don't have to worry, it's right on the right side. It has a microphone, and you don't miss any of the service if you need to avail yourself. And I'm serving double duty today. I am the lay pastoral associate today as well. So after service, I'll be available right over to my left if you need a listening ear for any reason. Now, this is a special time of year for us. September 29th, 1 week from today, we'll have our annual stewardship campaign kickoff lunch following the service. We have activities for the kids, ice cream sundaes, and even more. You may have received an electronic notice or postcard like this one in the mail. It's also listed in the happenings and the Sunday bulletin. And each one has an RSVP link. Even on your chairs today, you would have found an invitation. And you can use it to RSVP by filling it out and just dropping it in the collection plate today. We do ask that you only use one method to RSVP. So if that's by calling Mary Wolf Francis, as it lists on the postcard, or that's by using one of the electronic links, or the paper, but just RSVP once. We would like to see you here next week. So please plan to be a part of this very exciting event. Reverend Andy's back in the pulpit today and continuing the theme of covenant and a sermon dealing with our covenant with the earth. While there are still those that question the impact of climate change and its causes, the overwhelming data supports the conclusion that we must examine how we can positively impact our environment. The status quo, or ignoring changes in weather patterns, is not enough. The youth-led movement is a testament to the effects of climate change across the world. I'd like to highlight two of the leaders in the youth movement. Here in the U.S., Isra Hersey, a 16-year-old daughter of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, founded the U.S. Climate Strike in January 2019. It's the American arm of Global Youth Change Movement. She was alongside a 12-year-old Denver activist who stepped away now, and that makes Isra the sole executive director, 16. In March, the organization's largest strike inspired an estimated 1.6 million students across 120 countries to skip school in order to demand action on climate change from adults in power. Since then, she has organized locally and nationally for environmental justice with a focus on carving out space for young people of color within the movement. Most recently, she rallied students to participate in the global climate strike that took place on September 20th, where she spoke at the Minneapolis March. Another young lady from across the globe, Greta Thunberg, another 16-year-old from Sweden who has Asperger's syndrome, sparked a worldwide movement by skipping school on Fridays and sitting outside the Swedish parliament to protest against political inaction on climate change. Her actions led to her catching an emissions-free yacht across the Atlantic to speak to our Congress here in D.C. Her message was clear and concise. She stated, "I don't want you to listen to me. I want you to listen to the scientists. I want you to unite behind science. And then I want you to take real action." She submitted a scientific report that urges changes to the way we live in order to counter global warming, stating, "This report is my testimony." In a recent interview, Greta said that since she was different, she was sensitive to the atmospheric changes around her. I found it amazing that she felt she used a perceived disability to bring attention to a shared concern for all of our futures. As UUs, we also have been considered different by the larger religious community. Reverend Todd Eckloff writes, "Unitarians' historic commitment to reason, freedom of conscience, and our common humanity are part of what draws us and holds many individuals to Unitarian Universalism. Let it be that shared sense of purpose, no matter what our differences, that leads us to be part of the solution of our earth today. Welcome again to VUU, a call to progressive thought and consideration for what's possible if we are true to our principles and covenant. Welcome.
Please rise in body or spirit to join us with number 38, Morning is Broken. Morning has broken like the first morning. Blackbird has spoken like the first bird. Praise for the singing, praise for the morning, praise for them springing fresh from the word. Sweet is the royal fall, sunlight from heaven, like the first to fall on the first grass. Praise for the sweetness of the wet garden, sprung from completeness where God's feet pass. Mine is the sunlight, mine is the morning, born of the one night, Eden saw play. Praise with elation, praise every morning, God's recreation of the new day. Please be seated.
As the ushers prepare to do their thing this morning, I want to tell you a story. There was once a strong woman in a circus sideshow who demonstrated her power before big audiences every night. Toward the end of one performance, she grabbed a lemon. She squeezed the juice from the lemon in her hand, and she said to the onlookers, "I'll give you $200 if you can squeeze any more juice out of this lemon." So up comes a little small guy, picks up the lemon between two frail hands, and he squeezed it, and out came a teaspoon of lemon juice. And the strong woman was absolutely amazed. No one had ever been able to do this before. She says, she gave the man his $200, but privately she says, "What's the secret of your strength?" And the man said, "It's practice. I've been the treasurer of my church for 42 years. Now, that story is from an Episcopalian minister who probably has different worries than we do. I'll just tell you that our finance folks are often trying to squeeze the last drop of lemon juice. So please make it easy on them this morning and give generously.
Any children that would like to come down for the collection and then our Time for All Ages story, please come on down and join us. Sky, you want to come put your money in here? Thank you. Sit up so you can see the story. Good morning. I'm Marcy Bowden. I'm your Director of Faith Formation. We have a nice-sized crowd of children with us today. So after we leave today, Reverend Andy's going to talk about how sometimes people can't live where they want to live. And this is a story a little bit like that, so I thought I would tell this story to you. That summer, the fence that stretched through our town seemed bigger. We lived in a yellow house on one side of the fence. White people lived on the other side. And Mama said, "Don't climb over that fence when you play." She said it wasn't safe. That summer, there was a girl that wore a pink sweater. And each morning, she climbed up on that fence and stared over at our side. Sometimes I stared back. She never sat on the fence with anybody, that girl didn't. Once, when we were jumping rope, she asked if she could play. And my friend Sandra said no without even asking the rest of us. I don't know what I would have said. Maybe yes, maybe no. That summer, everyone and everything on the other side of the fence seemed far away. When I asked my mama why, she said, "Because that's the way things have always been." Sometimes I saw that girl with her mama in town. She looked sad sometimes. "Don't stare," my mama said. "It's not polite." It rained a lot that summer. Mama wouldn't let me go out in the rain. "You stay inside here where it's warm and safe and dry." But on rainy days, that girl still sat on the fence in her raincoat, and I saw her dancing around in puddles, splashing and laughing like, we're a little too far, like she didn't even care. She let herself get all wet. In the middle of the summer, the rain stopped, and I felt brave and free that day. I got close to the fence, and that girl asked my name. "Clover," I said. "My name's Annie. I live over yonder," she said. We stood looking at each other and smiling. "It's nice up on this fence," Annie said. "A fence like this was just made for sitting on." I reached up and touched the top of the fence. "My mama said I can't go on the other side," I said. Annie said, "My mama said the same thing, but she didn't say anything about sitting on it." "Neither did mine," I said. So that summer, me and Annie sat together on that fence. And when Sandra and them looked at me funny, I just made believe that I didn't care. Some mornings, my mama watched us. I was waiting for her to tell me to get down from that fence before I broke my neck. But all she said was, "I see you made a new friend." One day, Sandra and them were jumping rope near the fence, and we asked if we could play. "I don't care," said Sandra. And when we jumped, Sandra and me, we were still partners like we used to be. That hadn't changed. And when we were too tired to jump, we all sat up on that fence. All of us in a long line. Someday, somebody's going to come along and knock this old fence down, Annie said. And I nodded, "Yeah, someday." So that's not about living that fence, but it was about where the kids could even go play, isn't it? And what do you think? Did somebody ever knock down that fence and now kids can play all kinds of places? I think maybe that would be a good thing, wouldn't it? We are going to sing the children out to go to class, Remember that class gets out at 11:45 when you come to pick up your children. Thank you. Sorry.
Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day, for all gathered here and those far away, for this time we share with love and care. Oh, we give thanks for this precious day. Please be seated. As we move into the time of centering, would you please remain seated and join us singing number 1, May Nothing Evil Cross This Door. May nothing evil cross this door, and may fortune never pry about those windows made to roar and rain go by. By faith made strong, the rafters will withstand the battering of the storm. This heart through all the world grow chill will keep you warm. Peace shall walk softly through these rooms, touching our lips with holy wine, till every casual corner blooms into a shrine. With laughter drawn, the raucous shout, although these sheltering walls are thin, may they be strong to keep hate out and hold love in.
As those who wish to do so either light a candle or place a stone or write in the prayer book in the back, please join me in the spirit of prayer. God, who is love and connection, justice and peace, we offer thanks for this community. We know increasingly that some of the technology that we thought would unite us doesn't do so without our effort. That we need places like this in which we can bring our full selves, in which we can connect with other people, providing love and receiving love. Remind us, we pray, to be gentle with one another in these anxious days. As teenagers show us the way on climate change, we feel called to do something more, and yet the call to do something more unsettles us. We all want change, but we don't necessarily want to change, and that's part of the human condition. May we be gentle with one another. We pray this morning for Nancy Nielsen and all the rest of the family of Phyllis Hamilton, who died this past week after a life well lived. We pray that stories and memories will bring comfort to the family in this tender time. We pray also for the family of M.J. Adamovich, who died yesterday afternoon, a member of this congregation who made a significant contribution. Every time we walk over to the Faith Formation Wing, we see the mural that M.J. painted as a gift to our congregation. I give thanks for the family that surrounded M.J. in her last days, for the love that they demonstrated. And I give thanks for all the members of this community who demonstrated that same love to her and her family. What a gift it is to be a part of a loving community like this one. We pray for peace and comfort for MJ's family. We pray for the victims of the 10,833 gun deaths so far this year, including 2 killed in a bar in South Carolina just yesterday. Let us continue to wake up to this epidemic. Let us continue to insist on the change that our elected leaders have been reticent to provide. May we be vocal and clear about our principles and act on them. This need not be the case. May it one day soon not be so. We live in the midst of these struggles, the life and death and epidemics and environmental crises, and it is our charge to know who we are, to love one another, and in so doing to create change. May we be those people today and always. Amen. I've told you before, but I despise announcing the titles of sermons. I do it because it's expected. It's been expected in every congregation I serve. I think it's a terrible mistake, but nobody's listening. So if you came this morning expecting what was listed in the bulletin last month, or I either apologize if you don't like surprises, or you're welcome if you do like surprises. Sometimes a week just calls me to something different, and I felt like that was one of those rare weeks. This was one of those rare weeks. So I want to talk a little bit about our covenant with the earth this morning, but I want to get there in what might seem like an odd way. So, more than half a century ago, Georgetown University psychiatry professor Dr. Murray Bowen developed this theory of human behavior that came to be called Bowen Family Systems Theory. In his work with families, Bowen observed emotional processes, including the transmission of anxiety, like a virus, around a family system, and the ways multiple generations of families seem to carry predictable levels of anxiety and predictable levels of resilience or abilities to solve their problems. Instead of only thinking in a linear cause and effect way, she did this that caused him to do this, that caused her to do this, Bowen's theory encourages us to look at the whole system and the part that the individual is playing in a wider system, like a family or a congregation, that might lead them to certain behaviors. Why is it that, this isn't true of us, so I can say it, why is it that the finance chair always turns into an angry person? Every person we get in there, they get mad. David, see? And we change things, and David's still mad. And sometimes it's about the whole system, not just about the person. So instead of focusing on one symptomatic person, Bowen theory encourages working on self as a way of making the whole system work better. Think of a set of gears. If one small gear in a set begins to turn more slowly or more quickly, all the other gears have to change their functioning to compensate if they're going to stay together in the way they have been before. Healthy people can serve that way in all the many systems we're a part of, families, congregations, workplaces. If we make a change, we'll often create change in the systems around us. We notice that people begin to spin around us a little differently. One of the important concepts in Bowen's theory was that entire societies function a lot like families and other systems. In a family that's functioning well, members might act on deeply held values and principles and work together to solve their shared problems. In low-functioning families, anxiety is dealt with by focusing too much on children, either in a hopeful way or a fearful way, or in high-stakes fights between the parents. There's a lot of noise, but nothing ever gets better. Every system, Bowen said, has these times of progress when functioning is getting better, when people are increasingly free to be their true selves and to relate to other people productively. And every system has times of regression, when healthy functioning is on the decline, when people are in camps and those who express dissenting opinions are expelled. I don't think it's much of a stretch to say that we're in a period of societal regression. It didn't start in 2016, I don't think. The symptoms include gun violence, widespread drug abuse epidemics, political polarization. The symptoms are clear. But Dr. Bowen had something important to say about the cause of societal regression. It's summarized by Robert Creech in his brand new book, Family Systems and Congregational Life. He said, Bowen pointed primarily to environmental sources of the underlying anxiety of these times. He believed that conflicts between and among human beings, like war, are not the source of the anxiety driving the regression, but are symptoms. Rather, he concluded the conflict between the human and the earth lies at the root of societal regression. Conflict between the human and the earth. Bowen surmised that an exploding human population with its attendant environmental impact is near the source of the problem. And Creech goes on here. Human beings, he said, are distinctively aware of the limited resources to sustain life on earth and of the possibility that the rapidly increasing human population may soon exhaust such things as arable land, clean water, and fossil fuels. At the same time, we notice the absence of new frontiers beyond which to spread, and we begin to feel fenced in. Additionally, we begin to recognize that our ecosystem can't continue to absorb the waste products of our unsustainable, consumer-driven lifestyle. And Robert Creech, who somehow continues to survive as a Baptist minister, wrote this: "Whether or not we intellectually accept the conclusion of 97% of the actively publishing climate scientists that Earth is warming more rapidly due to human activity, we sense the threat to the world around us and to ourselves as well." End quote. So, in a period of regression, a society or a family or people in a workplace would act to relieve the anxious pressure of the moment, but they would rarely act on a set of long-term principles to solve a big shared problem. So folks in a regressive society might act to clean up the latest oil spill or march to save the sea turtles from plastic waste, but they wouldn't often be able to act on long-term principles about the environment, doing hard things like systematically weaning ourselves off of fossil fuels. In the end, a regressive society wouldn't be able to enact long-term fixes to its biggest problems. I think that's where we've been stuck for a little while. We sense the growing problem, but we are not able, our leaders at least, are not able to work together to get to the solution. But Bowen, who died in the 90s and who did most of his important work in the 60s and 70s, made an interesting prediction several decades ago. He said he believed that this current period of regression would last until the middle of the 21st century. Then he believed we'd reach a point at which the pain of taking the quick fix, easy way out would be greater than the pain of doing what was necessary to make permanent repairs. At some point, it will become harder to avoid the hard decisions than it is to make them. I think that transition is coming, maybe even a little sooner than Dr. Bowen thought. With children and youth often serving as our society's conscience, we're waking up to the dire consequences of continuing to do nothing. The pressure is building, as we saw this past weekend, among the citizenry of our country and throughout the world, to stop the childish posturing and actually do something that will make a lasting difference in preserving our planet. It's as if the alarm clock has gone off at 7:30 and we have an 8 o'clock meeting. Quickly, we have to discern our guiding principles when it comes to the environment and act on them in meaningful ways. There's reason to hope. It's happening, as we saw. We just have to be quick. But what to do? I hear people sometimes pit individual action against legislative action, work toward legislation, against one another. I heard Al Gore do it in an interview the other night. Though I think that's terribly counterproductive, I also think I understand. Canvas shopping bags and pigtail light bulbs really are not going to cool the oceans by themselves. We have to have big legislative changes, too, around auto emissions and factory emissions and mining and a lot more. And we can have some influence on those policies. Our own environmental action team is allied with Citizens Climate Lobby, which pushes for bipartisan legislative action to help the environment. Just one example of ways to exert pressure on the people we've elected to lead us to do the right thing. And friends, the pressure is growing. But I'm not a legislator. And as much as I wish we were, we're not a governmental body. We can't pass laws. Imagine how much better the world would be if we could pass laws. But alas, we're a faith tradition, and we have a lot to do ourselves. So let me approach it from a Unitarian Universalist faith perspective. We are historically rooted in the Jewish and Christian traditions, and that includes the Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. It affects us in ways we understand and in ways that are subconscious. In Genesis, there's this creation story that has been at the forefront of the West's relationship with the earth. God creates light and dark. God creates water and dry land, plants and animals, and then God creates the human being, the crowning achievement of her very busy week. And then God says to the human being, you have dominion over all of this. Name the animals, which makes them subject to you. Eat whatever you want. It's all yours to rule over. But I like the second creation story in the next chapter of Genesis. God sort of creates everything together, and it's a mess in some ways. She works with already existing materials like dirt to create the human being, who is now, at their inception, in their very cells, a part of the earth and not separate from it. And God makes some mistakes that have to be corrected. In this second account, God is very much like another human being, complete with foibles and character flaws. God even takes a walk in the garden every evening. We as a nation, certainly we as a faith movement, need to consciously switch stories. We need to move away from the notion that the earth is a resource, that it belongs to us, that we can any longer live our lives unconscious of our impact on the planet. To paraphrase theologian Martin Buber, we need to move from an I-it relationship in which the earth is an object to an I-thou relationship in which the earth is holy in its own right. It doesn't just have value determined by how it can be used by human beings. I believe that what we think and do along these lines as individuals is really, really important. And there are at least two reasons why. First, as I said earlier, people who are working to get clear on their own values and make their actions match their values change the systems around them. Have you ever been aware as you were doing something that it was against your values? I won't tell any stories because they're too personal, but some of you are shaking your heads. You know what I'm talking about. If you're human, you've probably been through that experience. Often, we put up with that resulting feeling of disappointment and even shame and do the thing anyway because we want people to like us. We watch a movie that conflicts with our values because our friends are going, or we stay quiet when saying something would have helped because we're worried we'll be exiled from a group, and even if that group is all the people in line at the store. We're all subject to that evolutionary force that pulls us to want to belong to a group. Sometimes, like when we're in physical danger, that force is a lifesaver. But I think what's needed most these days is people who have spent time sorting out their values around the preservation of the earth, who then act on them. That's maybe for two reasons. First, yes, every little bit counts. Every light bulb changed, every canvas bag carried into a store, every meal with no animal products contributes to the ultimate solution. But maybe just as importantly, when we know our values and make sure we're acting on them, we'll have an impact on the systems that we operate in. Other people might become curious about our actions, and we'll have a clear, relatively non-anxious explanation of why we're doing what we're doing, because we know why we're doing what we're doing. Isn't that how most ideas spread, at least in the beginning? Big change begins, movements are initiated with people who are clear about their values, who work hard to make their actions match their values, and then go out and live their lives accordingly. I have this good friend who's vegan. When I met him, I wasn't vegan. I like to tease him a lot about being vegan. And he isn't preachy. Who likes people who preach? Thank you for the three of you who got that. But this friend and his wife are our regular Thanksgiving pals. So they bring vegan dishes, and I like the vegan dishes they brought, and I started to ask questions. And before long, I realized that for me to really be true to my own principles, it was important for me to go vegan too. Not so that I could convert the whole world. That's not my goal. When I go see family in Indiana, I don't get preachy about veganism. But I did bring a vegan dish to a potluck in southern Indiana. Now, and I have to tell you a story about my Uncle Mike. My Uncle Mike is not vegan. But Uncle Mike sat down beside me and he took a spoonful of my chickpea salad that I had instead of the chicken salad and the ham salad they were having. He took a bite of it and kind of chewed and looked at me and said, "I'm going to try one more bite of that because that didn't go down very well." And then he took another bite, and when he didn't think I was looking, he pushed the plate away. Well, that's all right. I didn't come to convert Uncle Mike. What was important to me was that I not compromise my principles, and they're not everybody else's, that I not compromise my principles in an environment where it would have been easy to do that. Lately, though, I came across a little bit of a tangle. I got to chatting with other vegans and realizing that I was buying things like shoes and belts that were leather. And raising cattle on a large industrial scale is damaging to the environment, and I try not to support that. But I have to admit, my first reaction to new learning is sometimes defensiveness. Not so great. But recently, when I went to buy dress shoes, I found these affordable vegan dress shoes. I'm sure that if I keep listening, I'll come across other areas in which my behavior is not matching my values. And then I'll have to decide again whether I'll make the changes necessary to match them up. I think a little humility is going to go a long way as we try to figure all this stuff out. When we walk around, though, with our actions knowingly not matching our values, it can cause us to get cranky, reactive. We don't respond well to probing questions because we're trying to stem the tide of shame that's just below the surface for us. The project of our lives, I think, is to know what we believe and to match that up with our behavior. We can make a difference when we do that in our families, in our congregations, in our state, and even in the nation. People who are working to know and to act on their principles change the systems around them. For me, the most clear picture of that is Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old who started the climate strikes. There's a picture of her from, what was it, a year ago, Doug? Something like that she started. Sitting outside Parliament by herself, and then millions of people this past weekend marching. She drew people to her and was clear about her principles. We can learn from that. The second reason that I think what we think and do as individuals matters is that we can make the coming transition easier on ourselves. The changes that are going to be required in coming decades will likely often not be easy ones. They'll require us to live closer to the earth. Maybe we'll need to travel less, use less water, have fewer children, buy smaller cars, grow some of our own food. I don't know. And so even now, we would do well to be making those changes on our own, to the degree that we're able. I figure Dr. Bowen was probably right. By the middle of this century, we may well, if we don't act quickly, be facing big challenges that will require us to live differently. The human tendency to ramble down our current path until some crisis shakes us awake does not have to be the case. We can start now to live lives that make the earth a partner in covenant with us rather than a resource to be exploited. We have a covenant with this planet that if we take care of it, it takes care of us. When we live with respect to that covenant and the delicate balance that it implies, we're closer to the earth and healthier, more whole. We ignore that covenant to our own great peril. None of us will live it out perfectly, but that's all right. As the poet Rumi said all those years ago, though you've broken your vows 1,000 times, come, yet again come. So let us all get very clear about our principles when it comes to preserving the environment, and then make sure we're living them out. We can make a difference. Despair is no friend of ours. We can make a difference. Amen.
If you would rise and body your spirit for one of my favorite pieces, Blue Boat Home. Though before me I feel no motion, standing on these mountains
Now, if you'll please join me in our words as we extinguish the chalice. Though we extinguish the chalice, our connection to each other and this community remains. May its light guide us this week as we walk the path of justice, speak words of love, and fill our world with compassion until we meet again.
And now may life bless you and keep you. May the Spirit make its face to shine on you and be gracious unto you. May the universe pour out the fullness of its blessings on you and bring you peace. Go in peace, dear friends. Amen.